Everything is good until it's not, and everything works until it doesn't. This is No Singular Solutions. Welcome back to the No Singular Solutions podcast. My name is Joshua Hequet, and I believe that no matter what you've been through, you can still achieve greatness and help others along the way. This podcast is about self-awareness and self-discovery and how you can be authentically impactful. Don't forget, the best way to support this podcast is to follow on whatever platform you're listening to. Follow the show, download episodes, specifically on Apple Podcasts. Please rate and review. A lot of people don't know that 90% of all podcasts are listened to on Apple. And the easiest way to have this episode and this show come up as recommendations for others is to write a review and check the stars and leave an honest rating for me. You can direct your questions to nosingular-solutions.com/podcast. And there you can leave your questions for feedback on fives. Today's episode came from a listener who asked a question about perspective and specifically how I looked at things and what my perspective was about certain topics. And so today's episode is perspective. My guest today is the Mr. Gus Hequet. Welcome to the show, sir.
Pleasure to be here.
Gus, you and we met probably, 4 or 5 years ago, somewhere in there?
I remember distinctly. It was March of 2020.
Well, see, I wasn't that specific, but I like that. March of 2020. And you and we spent some time together on Sunday mornings. Mm-hmm. We were having some good conversations, and you are very insightful on many things, and you are a wealth of knowledge, to say the least. And so when perspective came up as a topic, I'm like, Gus is the guy. This is who we're going to talk to. Take a minute and just tell our listeners a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, and go from there.
I would call myself a longtime resident of Farmington. This is the longest I've stayed in one place since, really forever. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I wake up every morning and just go to work just like everybody else. I'm about as regular as they come.
That might be the understatement of the year. Professionally, what do you do?
I drive a garbage truck.
You drive a garbage truck.
I spent a little over 20 years in high-end specialty retail store management, and decided that I really wanted a job where I could just sit and think for most of the day. And so now I sit for about 10, 12 hours a day and make sure that our streets are about as clean as they could possibly be. And I go out of my way to make sure that I'm taking care of the community the best way I know how.
I love that. You and I have had several conversations on numerous topics over the years.
Covered quite the spectrum.
We have political and not, and we don't talk political here, so we'll stay out of that for the most part. Tell me a little bit about what perspective means to you.
I feel that perspective has a couple of different connotations, for lack of a better term. I like to think of perspective from really the world of art, because when you have a picture that you're looking at the artist's perspective. Well, people inherently think that the artist's perspective is what the artist sees. And I would push back on that. I think what the artist's perspective is what the artist wants you to pay attention to. So the artist's perspective, if I call myself an artist, my perspective of myself is what I'm choosing to bring to the attention of the people around me. It's what I want to project. It's what I want people to see. But there's a second part of perspective, because the second part of perspective is how you choose to absorb and intake whatever it is that you see. If you see a picture of the Mona Lisa, you can see Leonardo da Vinci's options for what perspectives he could show to the people of what he wanted to present. But then your personal takeaway is a completely different perspective. What does the Mona Lisa mean to you? I guarantee it's going to be completely different from what the Mona Lisa means to me. And both things are probably going to be very different from what Leonardo originally wanted to present to the world as a whole. So perspective is this kind of ever-flowing thing where it could be very specific, it could be very generalized, it could be very selfish, it could be very altruistic. And it's really hard to narrow down exactly what perspective means unless you're willing to sit and actually have the conversation with people of what did you mean? What are you bringing attention to? Where are you coming from? So you really can't have true perspective unless you seek understanding.
So for the average person, when they hear the word perspective, they might think seeing or observing a situation through the other person's lens.
Exactly.
Right? It's from the simplest sense, or the most basic sense would be there's my point of view or my perspective, and then there's the perspective of others. The art or the skill, I will say, in gaining further perspective of other people is it's rooted in empathy. It's rooted in, if I genuinely care about someone else's opinion, then I'm going to seek to understand so that I can view the topic or the concern or the situation through their eyes. Completely discount my opinion or my perspective for a second, put myself in their shoes and see it the way that they see it. Now, in the conversations that we've had in the past, I almost felt a little intimidated in some of those conversations because, our relationship started through some casual interactions, and then we started having some pretty deep and meaningful conversations. And I'm going, whoa, this guy has like this wisdom that is so far beyond what I saw coming from someone your age. Your insight had a certain level of intellect that frankly like dumbfounded me, where I was going, how is he not a collegiate professor?
Oh goodness, I'm blushing over here.
Like seriously, I remember one of the first times that we were talking, and I won't say what the topic was. I thought to myself, this dude is like a psychology professor. Like you were talking to me and I felt as if you were talking over me, and it challenged me. It really challenged me to get out of my comfort zone and understand the perspective that you were coming from and relative to the topic at the time. And so for us specifically, it created a much deeper conversation. And I felt as if we were to effectively communicate far beyond just an average conversation. Now, you had said it was March of 2020. There was a lot going on at that time.
There was a fair amount going on at that point in time.
The world was kind of like the snow globe that got tipped upside down, and we were trying to figure out where everything was going. Little did we know that there was going to be a lot more that was going to change in society. And I want to get a little bit more into, I really want to pick your brain on a few things, because
oh boy,
you have a very unique perspective that you've shared on a few things. And what I want to share with our listeners is perspective is about the thoughts, the feelings of another. And I like to dummy it down almost to a sense where I just say, just be a good human being, right?
Absolutely.
Just be a good human being.
It goes back to my 9 words. We can talk about that later if you're interested.
Fair enough. Though I really wanted to I wanted to ask you the question, like, where does that come from with you? Like, I feel like in all the things that we've talked about, like you have this innate ability to recognize the value of another human being for what they are, another human being. You never struck me as a person who sees, gender, race, profession, skill level. Like that was very clear from the first time that we started communicating. Where does that come from? Is there, was it in something that you learned growing up? Was there a specific time in your life where you had this like profound aha moment? But where does that come from?
Well, I think the easiest way to look at it is you will find more often than not that the most understanding people that you will come across on a day-to-day basis are the people that have been the most misunderstood. And that's usually because these people are interested in making sure that no one else feels the hurt that they've gone through. This is an excellent opportunity to bring up the 9 words. This is how I've raised my kids. This is what I scream from the rooftops when given the opportunity, is that there are 3 simple rules of life. The first one is be kind. The second one is assume positive intent. And the third one is don't be a jerk. It's 9 words to save the world. At any given point in time, you can find yourself in a situation where you're being challenged. If the first thing that you do is say, I'm going to be kind, I'm going to look at people and I'm going to say, no matter what the situation is, my job is to actively not make this situation worse. Secondly, I'm going to assume that no matter what this person is doing, they think that this is the best possible way out of this situation. And that's assuming positive intent. Doesn't matter if 2 people are diametrically opposed. They're both trying to finish this situation the best way that they know how. And finally, don't be a jerk. Just means at the end of the day, if you're just looking at people and going, look, they're just trying to get home and watch their TV shows too, everything happens a little bit faster if people are just going to pay attention to those 3 simple rules.
I really like that. I like the authenticity of it, right? Be kind, assume positive intent, and don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
Is that something that, I mean, does it come from childhood? Does it come from teenage years? Was there a specific thing that happened in life that or did you read something? Or is this how you've always kind of carried yourself?
This is just kind of a natural progression. When I was younger, I had a lot of anger problems because I would get picked on, I would get pushed around, I would get, shoved down. And you get to a place where you just think to yourself, is there a way that this could be better? And then you just get this natural progression where you start to realize that people aren't inherently bad. People are inherently good. It's the misinterpretations and the misconceptions and not perceiving what people are saying that ends up coloring the situation into a negative situation. I know, no politics. You go back to Nixon and Kennedy.
Yep.
At the end of the day, you have 2 people that disagree about everything. But if you watch the Kennedy-Nixon debates, it's 2 people standing up on a stage talking about how much they love the country and how much they want to change in order to make it better. They're coming at it from 2 entirely different directions.
Right.
And literally, they couldn't agree on what color tablecloth to have at dinner. But that doesn't change the fact that both of them are still going in the right direction. So
Right.
if you can figure out how to look at people and just say, you're a person. Let's just break it down to brass tacks. Gender doesn't have to come into it. Self-affirmations, that's not even a word. I'm making
Affirmations.
it up. There we go. That doesn't have to become a part of it.
Yeah.
If I meet a regular person on the street, congratulations, you're a person. My religion tells me that I'm supposed to care about you because you are unequivocally a child of God. Doesn't matter how you identify, doesn't matter where you came from. At the end of the day, I am supposed to care about you as a human being and an individual. I don't have to agree with what you do. I don't have to agree with how you identify. I don't have to agree with literally anything about your life. I'm supposed to care about you. So at the end of the day, how do I do that? Do I decide that I'm going to change them? Do I decide that I'm going to push them in a different direction? Do I decide that I'm going to, yell at them until they decide that they're going to yell back at me? No, I'm going to look at them and say, I genuinely want what's best for you. Whatever that looks like, whatever that means, I'm prepared to meet you where you are in order to help you become whatever you think the best version of you is.
See, and that's the part of it that's the part where I believe that the average person gets stuck, is that we all believe, well, we all have our own opinions. We all have our own likes, dislikes, things,
Perspectives.
Whether that's based on past experience, what we were taught, how we grow up. It's like it's our playbook, right? It's our framework.
It's what's comfortable.
So it's comfortable. And where society is stuck right now, in my opinion, is I think most people, generally speaking, have a good heart. And I believe that most people, generally speaking, have a good moral compass. They intend to do good. They get stuck in their own perspective when they become emotionally charged or excited about the topic or the conversation or the thing that's in front of them. And that's the point at which the average person stops looking at someone else's perspective. We could pick any number of topics across society now.
Across the board. Like just throw a dart at a dartboard. There's the one. We're going to fight about that. Let's go.
So I'm going to use something that is relatable locally. It is not political, but it is definitely something where people are going to go, oh, touche. Vikings and Packer fans.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a thing.
That's a thing.
And I've lived in both states.
And it's about 50-50 in both states. That's not, you can fact check, but I'm just going to say I think it's about split in both states. And one neighbor can have up their Vikings flag, other neighbor can have up their Green Bay flag, and they're going to jab at each other constantly. Favre sucked until he became a Viking, and then it was like, oh, he's amazing, right? So matter of perspective. But I think at the end of the day, like, the average person probably isn't building a fence or not talking to their neighbor because they're a Packers fan and they're a Vikings fan, right? Or I'm a Vikings fan, whatever. So now let's look at that scenario even deeper. If we use perspective on the Vikings Packers topic, we can all say, well, yeah, of course, we're not going to get like pissed off and destroy relationships over who our favorite football team is. But when you start to talk about religion, politics, COVID, and more specifically, social issues, because those are things that are very deeply personal to the average person.
Absolutely.
All of a sudden, the perspective changes. We don't look at and consider someone else's. So for our listeners, because right now their minds are spinning and they might even hit pause to reflect on that part of it because they go, uh-oh, where are they going with this? Let's talk about not a specific social issue, but let's just talk about the social issues that have come up in the last 2 or 3 years, right? And I say not that they didn't exist prior to that, but they have become more vocal amongst the masses. When you run into somebody, whether it's friend, family, coworker, and one of those topics comes up, tell me how you navigate through the communication to not only ensure that you maintain healthy boundaries, but you also show empathy and want to learn from someone else's perspective. Tell me a little bit about how you do that.
Well, I'll use kind of an anecdote. When I grew up here in Minnesota, I moved over to Wisconsin for a while. That's where I met my wife. And whenever anyone in Wisconsin found out that I was from Minnesota, there was always that initial jab. Oh, how do you think the Packers are doing this year? And I would always respond the same way. I'm really more of a hockey fan. It's me looking at them and saying, I know what you're doing. I know where you're going. We're not fighting. Because when you choose not to fight, you're still making a choice for what you want to do. And if my choice is I'm not going to ruin this relationship no matter how hard you're interested in goading me into it, I'm still making a choice. Now, if this is something that someone is very interested in having a discussion about, okay, well, we can have a discussion. There's nothing wrong with setting ground rules before the discussion and saying, look, at the end of the day, we're still going to go and get lunch after this because I'm not about to flush our history over whether or not you have an opinion that I hold. The second thing that I have to bring up is that you need to understand that every opinion on the face of the earth exists on the battlefield of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
If your opinion doesn't hold muster on the battlefield of ideas, that means you're not holding a very good opinion. So what you need to do is you need to take a look at your opinion and figure out where it falls apart.
But see, most people won't do that.
And that's
right.
And I think that's the primary downfall for what we're dealing with is logical thinking, critical thinking, that core discourse where people have to actually focus on what it is they're saying instead of just parroting what they've been told. That's where you start to have problems. I mean, I can stand at the corner of Pilot Knob and 50, and I can scream at the top of my lungs that anyone who stops and honks their horn is going to get $1 million. Okay. How many people are going to stop?
Right.
Who reads the fine print where I say overtime maybe? It's if you're not willing to sit down and actually look at those fine prints, if you're not going to figure out where the sources are coming from, if you're not going to analyze where, like, okay, bad thing happened. There was going to be a walkout at the junior high when my son was in junior high. I'm not getting into what was happening. I'm not getting into the reasons behind it. All I know is there was a walkout that was going to be happening. I looked at my son and I said, why? Simple question. Why are you walking out? Well, it's a protest. Okay. What are you protesting? Well, this is what I'm protesting. Okay. That's what you're protesting. Do you agree with the protest or are you just walking out? At this point in time, I shared with him, I don't care if you walk out or not. That's on you. Those are your decisions. Go nuts. But it's also up to you to decide whether or not you are choosing to stand with the people that are actually organizing this walkout. So we do some research. We sit down. We start Googling things. We start paying attention to what's going on around everything. We start to realize the groups that are actually pushing for this walkout to happen. Because believe it or not, it was actually a nationwide effort. And then we start looking at the groups that are actually pushing this nationwide effort. And I'm not putting my opinion on any of this. Notice how I didn't say a single thing about this. I'm merely showing to my son, this is what's going on. Is this something that you want to ally yourself with? I will support you either way. That's on you. At the end of the day, if you have to take detention, you know what? Maybe that's what you have to do for your beliefs. I'm good with that. At the end of the day, we're still going to go get ice cream because it's a very important thing for a young man to figure out what he stands for. Does it align with my beliefs? Don't care because he's his own man. He's making his own decisions. He's walking his own path at this point in time. And that's the thing is, I know I'm right. I know I'm good. My opinions have already held out on the battlefield of ideas as far as I've tested them. And in order for me to get the best opinions I can get my hands on every single time I find something that challenges my opinions or forces me to think outside of that box, let's go. Let's sit. Let's have. We're gonna have turnovers on your front porch, solving the world's problems, one sunrise at a time for as long as it takes for us to have ideas and beliefs.
Right. It's so fascinating to me when you look at the impressionability, that's a word, right?
Mhm.
Impressionability of others onto ourselves, peer influence, right? And the first thing that I always catch myself doing is this really the perspective of someone else, or is this something that they have just convinced themselves of, and it is just a matter of opinion? And I think there's a very slippery slope there, because there's a topic, there's something that's being talked about, there's, somebody is pushing for the thing. Okay, is that really their perspective, or are they carrying that on from somebody else, right? So did it come from an extreme source, or, a national thing that all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, me too. And then you go, well, that's not really your perspective. That's just you carrying that opinion forward and trying to put it onto somebody else. I think when you really get into it, the average person doesn't want to open themselves up. The average person, I feel like, is not either comfortable with what their opinions really are or their position, and it really isn't their perspective.
Absolute
It's
facts.
just something that's
Absolute
being
facts.
regurgitated. And so I want our listeners to really think about that. I want them to take a hard look inward and ask yourself the hard question. I like to call it the personal litmus test. You don't have to tell anybody, but you already know your answer. When you feel yourself, the heart rate increases and you feel yourself getting charged about something that you're very passionate about. Is it something that you're really passionate about? Does it really matter to you? Or is it just a position that you've taken based on peer influence or somebody else? And now you're trying to say, okay, how many other people can we get to raise our hand and jump on board to this thing? And I think that is the most non-authentic way of living. And that's specifically what I've been seeing with a lot of social issues the last 3 years. Thoughts on that? What do you?
Well, when you have a different social issue, inevitably it's going to polarize people. The problem that you run into is these two different camps, they're not interested in talking. They're interested in perpetuating their camp. What I like to do, again, and we'll jump back to the concept of the battlefield of ideas, is when I find myself kind of latching onto an idea, the first thing that I try to do is I try to disprove it. Because then that way, even if your opinion, your stance, your belief is validated, you're forced to analyze the other side. You're forced to analyze where people are coming from. You're forced to pay attention to what these other people are saying. When you have a breakdown in communication between two groups of people, inevitably you're not going anywhere. You're not going to get anything done. I've had interactions, and I know these are interactions on social media and everyone's a keyboard warrior,
Right.
but you get to the end of the day where I know that what I've said has merit when people resort to calling names.
Good point.
The moment you have run out of facts and you've decided to resort to diatribes or name calling or even threats, which is a thing that happens.
Mhm.
Congratulations. I've pushed you to a place where you have to deal with some deep introspection, because you know that I'm not selling a bill of goods at this point in time.
Right. Right.
And then when you start the whole thing with well, I'm more of a hockey fan actually, because I'm not fighting. I have cut emotion completely out of this. I am dealing in raw facts that are verifiable by anyone, either side of the issue. Go nuts.
Here, this probably won't surprise you when I say this, but when I was first elected, I was very active on local community pages. And part of that was, it's my effective communication technique, meet people where they're at, converse with them in the way that they want to converse. And I was often tagged on posts for clarification. And what I realized right away was it was deferred accountability. When someone had a question, rather than, to your point earlier about being critical thinkers and being resourceful, they wouldn't go to a source to try to figure it out. Like I became that source. And when I start putting information out that they didn't agree with, it got quiet really quick.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, I wasn't being tagged. I wasn't getting phone calls. I wasn't getting emails. And I sat there for a second and I thought to myself, do people really not want to know?
Oh, ignorance is bliss.
I like that. To me, still to this day blows my mind that you'll get, I mean, granted, there's super compelling issues in life that come up. There's things, but then there's just the day-to-day stuff. The number of inquiries that I get is so small because I think the average person doesn't really want to know the truth. They don't really want a solution to the problem. There's this need to just want to like either redirect something that's bad in their life and it's the thing that they want to complain about. So rather than complain about it directly and potentially have a solution put in front of them, it turns into well, I don't want to interact because like I can go over here and stir up things with like-minded people and we just go in this perpetual cycle of never solving a problem and just complaining about it.
Yeah.
And I see that true across society, that everybody has, not everybody, a large percentage of people who I interact with are quick to tell you their opinion, but they never bring forward a solution. And I used to think it was about that they just didn't know and they wanted help. I firmly believe now that with all the things we're going on with in society, that a lot of people don't want the solution.
Oh, of course not.
Like they just don't want to figure things out because that means that we've agreed on something. And God forbid we'd agree on something, because that means I no longer have my opinion or my perspective. And I backed away. I will not engage unless absolutely necessary, even to the point where stuff is slanderous. And that doesn't make me a less empathetic human being. I certainly look at everyone as if they're human beings and they have the ability to do good. It's their choice. But I choose to not be pulled into that, despite the fact that I want to learn more and reach out and better understand. But I'm like, I can't be the only one in that conversation. Would you agree with that?
I'll take and I'll piggyback on that, because in that same time period that you and I met, again, a lot going on. I would read things and I would genuinely and truly want to understand. I've always been very curious. I've always been very inquisitive. I walk into situations with absolutely zero knowledge about something with the intent of walking out knowing that I would be one of the top 5 people in the room to talk to about this, whether or not I agree with it. So I would reach out to people. I would intentionally go looking for the people that held the most volatile beliefs contrary to my own, for nothing more than the reason to understand. I sought understanding, because if I have an idea and that idea is vehemently wrong to half of humanity, I need to do some deep introspection on my own beliefs. You know, if I come to somebody and say, I absolutely love vanilla ice cream, and you say, I like chocolate ice cream, vanilla ice cream literally means that you like the devil. Well, that's a pretty heated debate topic. And we need to get into it, because
that's why they make twist cones now.
But you see, maybe we don't want to have any sort of mixes to our ice creams, right? Because then you start talking about toppings, and then you've got, you know, the people that insist that gummy worms and cookie crumbles are supposed to go into a vanilla sundae, and I just will not stand for that in my neighborhood. But you see how rapidly that could get out of control.
Oh, yeah.
But instead of just accepting the fact that we're always going to be at odds, maybe you have a very deep core memory of a great day after a little league game where your coach went out and bought everyone chocolate sundaes.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter if the coach was able to, get chocolate sundaes for half the price of vanilla sundaes. That's your core memory. So chocolate inevitably will always taste better to you, especially on a hot summer day. Maybe I have a core memory where, my grandpa took me out and we got vanilla soft serve. And it was truly like the end of a perfect day for a 5-year-old. We're both saying the same thing.
Right.
We're just using different words.
Right.
And we're not going to figure that out unless we get to a point where we're both willing to talk about those great parts of our childhood that have turned into core memories.
So if we genuinely want to change society, and this is my personal impact statement is I want to inspire others to aspire to change the world. That's what I genuinely believe. I genuinely believe that that's how I can continue to impact society. When I look at society and I look at all the potential that we have, the possibilities that are in front of us, I firmly believe that the first thing that we have to concentrate on is the perspective of others. I don't believe that we can get through anything else if we can't get over that. Because if we continue to stay in this position of being closed-minded, or I'm only going to look at things the way that I see them, over time, we're going to get a hard divide. And history, in not just American history, but history throughout the world and through all the cultures and thousands of years, has proven that. So how do we do that going forward? If I'm an average person who works a normal job, I'm a little bit involved with my community, I'm aware of where I'm at in my life, I'm trying to do something better, I'm listening to this podcast and wondering, okay, that all sounds great. Those are really good examples, but what can I do today to start moving forward and better understand the perspective of another person? What would you tell them?
Challenge yourself every single day. Every single day. Everybody knows that person. It doesn't matter what your personal beliefs are. I'm whiter than Christmas over here. Could not be more Caucasian. How many times have I been invited to a Juneteenth ceremony? Multiple. And I went. No presumptions, no expectations. Let's go. Let's have fun. You know what's delicious? Oxtail soup. It's phenomenal. Some of the best barbecue you're ever going to have. And this is something that happened in Milwaukee, where you find yourself going to places where you never thought you'd be. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Go talk to that person. Have lunch with them. Sit down with them. Pick their brain. Look them straight in the face and say, look, I might ask some stupid questions, but all I'm trying to do is understand. I'm just trying to figure things out. And at the end of the day, if we end up not being compatible human beings, you know what? That's okay. I don't wish you any harm. I don't wish you any ill will. I'm still interested in being a person that you can rely on at the end of the day, because we're all still in this together.
Mm-hmm.
If you go through your entire list, your entire repertoire, and you still can't find that person, and I know you're not looking very hard because everybody knows that person.
Correct. We all have those, plural, those people or
Everybody
persons
does.
in our lives. Yeah.
And oh no, you have to search them out. Okay, so go sit at a different table in your coffee house in the morning.
Right.
Reach out to a political candidate that you disagree with and offer to buy them coffee in order to sit down and have a chat. Trust me, they will. It
Right.
happens. It's a thing. But if you genuinely and truly can't find that person, go to your library or download either Hoopla or Libby are the two that I use. Download an audiobook. Download an audiobook that you know you'll disagree with. Listen.
Mm-hmm.
Listen or read. I have a specific belief system for what I think the best political systems are. And I got there from doing things by going out and finding oppositional literature and reading and absorbing. And what's the worst that could happen? Your opinion changes?
Right.
I mean, it's not like someone's going to come and cut your arm off because you're suddenly not part of a certain club again. That's not
Right.
how this happens.
Right.
If you're not pushing yourself to be 1% better every single day, well, what's the point of even waking up in the morning?
Right.
And when I say that, I don't mean I have to be 1% stronger. I'm not saying I have to be 1% better at my job. It's something different every single day. Hey, I made a friend today. Do you have any idea how many people don't say that every single day?
Oh yeah.
Congratulations. Your circle of influence just got bigger. You just formed a better tribe. You
Mhm.
just got yourself a bigger slice of humanity. These are all things that you want to do. Who doesn't want to make friends? Who doesn't want to find more people that they can rely on?
So go to the next step now, because I think and I feel, based on my experience with people, that many of them will get over that first step. They get over that spectrum, or that first step of, okay, I accept that I need to be more open. I accept that I need to put myself in circles that make me uncomfortable. I accept that I'm willing and honestly want to move forward to gain perspective from someone who specifically I might not agree with on a position or an issue that I don't agree with. All right, so I've made it that far. And I think that applies to most people. They get to that point. The next step, though, is actually doing it. Because what's the first thing that comes to mind? What are other people going to think? If all of a sudden I start talking to a group of people or a person, or I start putting myself in an area where I know that I'm around people who maybe aren't like minded, have opposing viewpoints, but I genuinely want to gain their perspective. Those that I did surround myself with, that circle that I had that was more like minded, all of a sudden there's, oh, you've changed. You're different. You're one of them. And they start to push on you. And that gets really uncomfortable with relationships. What would you tell the person who says, I'm committed to doing this? I want to start to learn more and gain a perspective from another, but I'm afraid of, or I'm hesitant to, because of the blowback from the people that I'm with right now. What would you tell them?
Well, I've got two things that I'll say to that. The first one, just dress me up like Mrs. Doubtfire for a second. I'm gonna end up being your big mama. Show me your future, or show me your friends. I'll show you your future. If you have a grouping of individuals that are willing to push back on you simply because you're trying to understand and you're trying to better yourself, are those really the people that you want in your ballpark?
Well said.
I don't,
Well
because
said.
the people that I surround myself with genuinely and truly want what's best for me. Round two. We talked about this a little bit leading up to this. You cannot grow without stress.
Correct.
So you need to stress yourself to become better. That's why you go to a gym. That's why you ride your bike. That's why you run. Because you're finding ways to stress yourself in controlled, safe situations, so you have the ability to grow in a direction that you want to grow. So, for instance, I'm terrified right now. Absolutely.
Yep.
My voice is being recorded for all time in posterity. There's going to be a record of this that is going to exist everywhere. And
First time you've done this, right?
first time I've done this.
I love it.
And I have been shaking nonstop since the record button has turned on. I don't know if you can see it in the video. I don't know if it's coming across in my voice, but I am abjectly terrified right now.
All right.
And here I am in a safe situation,
Yeah.
stressing myself so that I can become a better person. So when I wake up tomorrow, I can say I'm 1% better than I was yesterday because I did a thing. And I'm doing it in a place that I know is safe, that's not going to take advantage of me, that
Yeah.
is not going to push me in a direction I don't want to go, that is going to help me to truly become a better person and
Mhm.
become a better version of myself, even if it's rough. If anything easy isn't worth having, and anything worth having isn't easy.
Right.
So here I am.
See, that's your wisdom. And I love that because, well, first, I appreciate you saying that. I know we talked a little bit about it. Well, it was earlier today or yesterday, you sent me the text and you're like,
Yep.
I am terrified.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure I want to do this.
I sat in the car in the driveway for a couple of minutes before I left the house, and I was like, I'm going to find a really good song, and I'm going to find my center, and then we're going to go.
I love that. And that's the point of, well, it wasn't the intention of the podcast. You know, I don't know if you knew this or not, but I told a story before where I've wanted to write a book for a long time. And it was, you know, part of its life story, its perspective, it's my insight things. It wasn't like to make money and, you know, oh, read my story. It's more about my healing and my growth. So my grieving, my healing, my forgiveness, my growth is taking all the stuff that's in my head and putting it on paper. And I'm like, my hand and I can't type and write as fast as I can talk. And I can't talk as fast as I can think and process. So I have to find a way to do this. I'm just going to start recording it. And when I started recording it, I thought, well, this is kind of foolish just to keep this here. Why don't I push this thing out? It took me 48 hours and I got a podcast out. And the basis for the podcast was, let's just start picking all these topics that we're thinking about, but we're not talking about. And let's have real conversations. Let's get a little bit uncomfortable. And each person that I've had on the podcast has left and I've seen a change in them. Whether or not this was the catalyst or this podcast became that point in which they pivoted, but I noticed it. I noticed that even from the time that we stopped recording and the conversation we had on the backside to their social media presence, to the conversations and relationships we've had since then, it's a matter of perspective. And when you get uncomfortable, be honest with yourself and start talking about the things that we've been thinking about and we haven't been able to verbalize, we experience growth. And that's really the focus of every one of these episodes, is to get, even if it's one person, I would be grateful beyond means if 1,000 people listen to an episode. I'll never know the ripple that this show will have.
Don't ever tell me if there are 1,000 people listening. I will straight shut off. You want to watch the power reset button happen? Yeah. Hey, Gus, 1,000 people are listening to you. Wait,
what?
Excuse me.
We're not there yet.
Oh boy.
But that's, you know, with perspective is such a huge episode. And I know, you know, we're clipping on, actually, we're going to break a record as to the longest episode we've had thus far.
Oh boy.
But the idea was to start with all of these different topics and try to keep it high level, 10,000 foot view, knowing that we're going to come back later and get deeper into the weeds on each one of the topics and take it from, you know, relatable to actionable. But yet I wanted to make sure that there were listeners who took something away from every episode. And today I believe that we gave them something very insightful on perspective. And you shared some things that are very personal to you about how you look at other people in their situations. And that's the challenge that we want for our listeners. We want them to really start looking inward, have an honest conversation with themselves. What's more important? Seeking out the perspective of someone else to better understand where they're coming from so that I can grow and have better relationships and be a better communicator with all people, or stay in my comfortable zone with like-minded people who might be affirming things that are untrue or falsehoods. That takes courage. And maybe people won't do it tomorrow, but hopefully they'll do it the following day or the next week. It's that 1%. Just push yourself a little bit more each day. Seek to understand others from their perspective. Put yours to the side for a minute and genuinely look at where they're coming from and what they're saying. Formulate your own opinion later, but at least have that conversation. I don't believe that you can go wrong by doing that. Agree?
Exactly.
I think we
It's
start there.
The seek for understanding is never going to lead you down the wrong path, because even if it's not for you, at the end of the day, you still understand it, which means you might not be that person that's marching in the protest. But when someone says, oh, look at these yahoos doing whatever, you can turn around to that person and say, well, actually, here's where they're coming from. And that's going to be how we start to turn the boat. That's going to be how we start to shift the tide. That's going to be how we get people from reactionary to actionary, and even to a place where just common respect becomes back in fashion.
I love that. That is absolutely where we have to start. And we all know those people. We all know the group. We all know, we all have those people in our lives. And the more we can have the conversation with them and share with them why it's important that we seek out the perspective of others and how that can genuinely impact their lives, that's when we start to move society forward, ultimately for the better. And we can still disagree on a lot of things. There's nothing wrong with that. Before we finish here, Gus, I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity. You have an open mic. Take a minute or two, take 10 seconds, whatever works best for you. But feel free to say anything or share anything that you want to share. Drop a little Gus wisdom on us here.
I have always believed that the best litmus test for what is true is that pure truth will always make you at least a little uncomfortable. And when you get to a point where you can learn to live with that discomfort, you can start to peel back exactly what kind of a person you are. And that gives you an opportunity to make peace with the things that you need to make peace with, to truly become the person that you are meant to be in the long run.
I love that. I love that. I don't know how much you enjoy driving a truck every day, but you have way more value to the world than the job that you hold. And I hope that at some point in your life, whatever it looks like, that you have, I don't know if it's mentorship, I don't know if it's, somehow sharing your wealth of information, your perspective, your insight, your knowledge, and your wisdom. I hope doors continue to open in ways that offer you the opportunity to do that, because you have a ton to offer society and the world. And I hope for that for you.
I've got more of those people to meet.
Well, let's do that. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you being on the show. I appreciate you sharing your insight and your perspective with us. And yeah, let's do it again, huh?
Yeah. If you'll have me, I'll see if I can do it, then do the next one without shaking.
Oh, you'll be fine. You did fantastic. You did fantastic. Thank you very much for listening. Remember, I appreciate you. I believe in you. I believe that you can become the best version of yourself, and I'm here to help. I hope that you found this episode to be both insightful and informative. Please go be amazing and help others along the way. Thank you for listening, and God bless. This is No Singular Solutions.